here. Phil Mackey, Judd Zulgad, and Declan Goff producing. And every Friday, we take a trip into the SKOL Reddit section of the internet, where today's topic is going to open some fun doors, Declan. Why don't you tee it up for us?
I'm excited. I saw this a couple days ago. I'm really excited to get into it. What is your favorite Vikings rumor or conspiracy theory? And there's a couple great ones on here.
I've got 4
Okay.
for you guys. I sort of cherry picked through. Now, some of these, like, people made up their own conspiracy theories.
Correct. They admit that.
But there are 4 in here that are legitimate conspiracy theories or things that have happened that require more flushing out. And let's start with one, like, we're gonna start with an obvious one and then get through to some that are less obvious, okay?
Okay.
We'll start with the Giants stealing the Vikings plays at the Meadowlands in the 41-donut loss in the NFC Championship game 20 years ago. There's a full write-up here from yourteamcheats.com. Did you guys know that this was a thing that the Giants were being accused of the week before in the playoffs as well? They beat a young Donovan McNabb and Andy Reid. The Eagles were the first team to blow a whistle on this.
First time I've ever heard of it.
Judd, did you know that?
That they had been accused previously? I did not.
The week before.
I remember the dust up about this after the loss really well, but no, I did not know that.
So here are the details according to yourteamcheats.com. In early 2001, a column from the Toronto Globe and Mail included an item alleging that the Giants were under suspicion from the NFL for eavesdropping on conversations between the offensive staffs and quarterbacks of the Eagles and Vikings during their 2001 playoff victories. No league or team source was quoted, and no specific violation was cited. The original article is no longer available. Very interesting. According to the Globe and Mail, there were serious allegations running through the league that the Giants cheated in the playoffs by intercepting radio transmissions. According to the report, the concerns were brought to the attention of NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue at the time after the Eagles claimed in the first round, the wild card, or was it? It might have been the division round because I think the Giants had a bye.
Correct.
Because the game against the Vikings was the conference championship. But the Eagles claimed that the Giants were able to listen to the plays being sent via radio from the coaches to the quarterback. So McNabb's got he's got his speaker in his helmet.
He never had a chance.
And he's listening for the play, and the bleeping Giants are also hearing the same play. When the Giants heard the plays, they set up their defense accordingly with hand signals. Apparently, similar allegations were being expressed by the Minnesota Vikings after being dominated by the Giants in that game. According to the report, the NFL was feverishly trying to keep the issue quiet, with the Giants having qualified for the Super Bowl.
Cover up.
What do you think? Do you buy it?
Absolutely, yes. Now
those Giants were
Vikings,
not that good, too. Kerry Collins.
To be clear, though, the Vikings got their ass kicked, okay? So
because the Giants knew their plays.
Nah, so if the Giants don't know the plays, then they win by 20 points. But anyway...
you don't think the Vikings put up 30 or 40?
I absolutely buy that. And don't forget who came from, and he was gone by this point, but who came from the Giants organization? Bill Belichick. Like, you don't think that Belichick just got to the Patriots and was like, I'm going to start cheating now. No. He knew from before.
But Bill Parcells wasn't coaching the Giants anymore.
He had been, but my point is that there was probably a long ingrained history. And in the 90s into the early 2000s, nobody cared. There was probably a long ingrained history in Giants football of, shall we say, being frisky with things that you shouldn't have been. I absolutely 1,000% buy that in the 80s and 90s in this league, there was rampant cheating that we don't talk about and for the most part probably don't know about. But look, the Vikings piped in noise to the Metrodome. And the Giants, and I'm sure they're not the only one, stole signals. Do I buy this? 100%. Yeah. I don't even think it's a conspiracy theory. I think it's accurate and something that we don't talk about. Much like steroids in baseball, right?
And
now we talk about them, but we didn't want to then.
Right. And if you start to look at some of the stats in those 2 NFC playoff games with the Giants, and clearly they weren't able to replicate the same thing against the Ravens because they were in a neutral environment. It was the Super Bowl, okay?
Yes.
So those 2 games between the Giants and the Eagles and the Giants and the Vikings. The Giants against the Eagles the week before jumped out to a 20-3 lead early in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. They held the Eagles to 186 total yards on the day.
Wow.
So the Eagles just couldn't do anything. They couldn't move the ball.
Yep.
McNabb was under 50% completions for the day, and they only ran the ball for 46 yards. And so you look at that and you say, if a defense knew exactly what plays you were running, what would the stat line be? And you probably say, well, I mean, like you'd move the ball a little bit because
Sure.
you're still a professional offense, but you probably get stuck before you got to 200 yards. In that game against the Vikings, they jumped out to a 41-0 lead. That was the final score. The Vikings only had 114 yards of total offense. And here's the amazing thing and why I believe this is true. When you fall behind 20-0, 27-0, etc., ordinarily you start to rack up a ton of yards because the opposing defense plays prevent and you're just allowed all the underneath stuff, right? You would think that once they fell down by 3 touchdowns, ordinarily within the flow of the game, the quarterback who's trailing is still going to throw for 300 yards because the defense is not playing clamp down defense unless they know what play you're running. So I totally believe this, 100%.
Yeah, and to be clear, from my perspective, the Vikings did not deserve to win that day, but do I believe the teams cheated? Yes.
I will say if the Giants had intercepted the Vikings play calls from the beginning of that game, then it's no longer a question of whether the Vikings deserve to win. Of course the Vikings deserve to win if the Giants were intercepting their play calls. It no longer comes down to the competition on the field. If I know what play you're running based on stealing
Saranga played that day
irrelevant.
As a Viking.
Irrelevant.
You deserve what
Moss
you get when you
played.
put guys like that out there. And Moss melted down pregame because his friends were, I believe, booted from the sideline. The Vikings brought on their own problems. But yeah, I think that if we're going down the conspiracy theory or not, that this is more than a conspiracy theory. I think it's probably true.
It happened. And it cost the Vikings a trip to the Super Bowl.
Stop with that. Honest to God,
Right,
you just took it too far.
Here's the second one from SKOL Reddit. This is a write-up from the Daily Norseman, but it's actually from a podcast that I listen to all the time. It's called Something to Wrestle With Bruce Pritchard, who's been a longtime employee and writer and talent manager and everything for the WWF.
Okay.
And he used to be Brother Love back in the 80s. Brother Love, with this. I think he introduced The Undertaker, I want to say, him and $1 Million Man. But he said on his podcast 2 years ago that Vince McMahon almost bought the Vikings in 1999.
Oh, really?
Red McCombs wound up buying the Vikings.
In 98,
but when they were
right?
for sale, when did Red McComb buy? Yeah, 98. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So,
pride.
yep. So this is what it
Vince
says.
McMahon, wow.
On this podcast, Bruce Pritchard says Vince McMahon explored the possibility of purchasing the Vikings back in 1998. How serious were McMahon's thoughts about actually buying the team? Well, here is the write-up. We don't know what the hell he was talking about. More than anything, it was a publicity stunt because they were floating out there that the Vikings were up for sale, and Vince floated out there that he was interested in it. Mm-hmm. I dare say that if the price would have been right, he might have bought the damn team just for publicity purposes. Just to say the WWF bought the Minnesota Vikings and Vince McMahon was now entering the football arena, which he did 2 years later anyways with the XFL. So it got people talking a little bit. According to the story, McMahon would not have had the personal wealth on his own at the time to purchase the team, but he could have headed up a group of investors that would have purchased the Vikings. The Vikings were then sold to Red McCombs instead. So could you guys imagine Vince McMahon owning the 1998 Vikings? Oh my gosh.
What I would think would happen if Vince bought a Minnesota team because of his ties and against AWA, he would have relocated those Vikings so quickly. He would have actually pulled the Red McCombs, moved them to San Antonio, wherever the hell he wanted to go. I think he would have actually moved the Vikings if he bought them.
Well, he would have done the same thing McCombs did, which is hunt for a stadium deal first, right?
Yeah.
And then would have gotten shot down. So that would have been interesting. And then when it was time to fire Denny Green, it would have been very easy. You're fired.
Oh, that'd be great.
You know what? This does make perfect sense.
That was the peak of the WWE's popularity too, 1998.
So Red bought the Vikings before, I believe it was the 98 season for $250 million, okay?
That's amazing.
If you guys recall, there was a point in there where we thought that the Vikings were going to be sold, and I think he turned out to have insufficient funds to make the purchase to the author, Tom Clancy.
Mm-hmm.
And so this does make perfect sense. I think Declan's right, though. I think if Vince McMahon buys them, the one thing that amazed me about Red was, and I don't know if he just behind the scenes ran into roadblocks or what, but that Red didn't move the franchise. Mm-hmm. Declan's right. Vince McMahon would have found a way because he would have gone to court and wouldn't have cared, which I think Red did care, to move the team. And I mean, hell, you could have moved that team to Los Angeles, let's say around 2000.
I mean,
with really, it would have been a pain in the ass to do it, but it could have been done.
Vince owning the Vikings would have made for some amazing cross promotion of like wrestlers.
How would you feel today if
John Randall would have been great in the Royal Rumble?
If Vince McMahon had moved the Vikings franchise, how would you guys feel about Vince McMahon today? If
he'd be hated.
We were going into year 20 since the Vikings had moved.
But I actually disagree. I don't think he would have moved the team because Minnesota for Vince is a hotbed area for shows and for talent. And I don't think he would have looked to like upset one of the top 15 markets in the. Maybe.
You got that team in L.A., baby?
He's definitely got personnel and people tied here. I just don't think he's ever been in love with Minnesota, and I feel like there's still a like vendetta against this.
And does Vince care about things like that?
Well, he cares about having an audience for his product.
Yeah. Right, but the wrestling fans, I don't think, are going to disappear because he took their football team.
Yeah. Well, it would have been fun to.
There's a certain president right now who doesn't care about stuff like that. You know how it works.
So here's another one, bypassing the political discussion that Judd wants to drag us into.
I'm just saying, I mean.
So the Herschel Walker trade was apparently facilitated by the NFL in 1989 in order to help boost the big market Cowboys, okay?
I've never heard this, by the way.
There's an essay. If you want to read the whole thing, just Google go to SKOL Reddit and you can click on the link here. But Jeff Pearlman actually posted an essay from somebody a couple years back on his website. You can Google like Jeff Pearlman, Herschel Walker, and there's a whole essay explaining the conspiracy theory. But the 3 bullet points are, number 1, that the big money owners, like the new owners, the Jerry Jones of the world, the new big money owners in the NFL, wanted the big market teams, notably the Cowboys, to be good. So that was thing number 1. And the Cowboys were a disaster in the late 80s. Number 2, the NFL went to the Vikings and said, look, all right, we need you to dump a bunch of first-round picks to the Cowboys in order to make this happen. And we will reward you with bullet point 3, which is, Mike Lynn, you will become the president of the new World League of American Football, which happened in 1990. Mike Lynn, the Vikings general manager, became the president of the NFL's new initiative to go outside of the United States.
I've never heard this before.
Also, Pete Rozelle was the commissioner and abruptly quit with 3 years left on his contract in 1989 going into 1990. And they just sort of randomly found Paul Tagliabue. They dusted off a lawyer, one of the NFL's lawyers, Paul Tagliabue, to help facilitate this trade.
Yeah.
So do you guys believe that the NFL said, all right, the Cowboys need an influx of talent. Let's make this trade happen, even though it makes no sense for the Vikings to do this at all whatsoever? Let's pull the trigger on this trade and make the Cowboys relevant again. And they went on to become a dynasty.
Absolutely not. No. And here's why. Herschel Walker was a marquee name. Like, the trade makes no sense. Like it's too well thought out. No, I'm not buying this. And in fact, this is the first time that I have heard this. But Herschel Walker was a huge name at that time. Like, this was a football god.
Yeah.
And to be like, well, let's go long play here, which is smart, but to be, to say, and then to tie those draft picks to players and have Lynn, who got taken in the deal, not realize that the Cowboys were going to cut all those players so that they could use the Vikings draft picks, because Lynn at that time thought that he would not lose most of those first round picks or those high draft picks. No, I'm not buying this for 1 second, because it makes, from a football standpoint, it makes sense. But from at that time, Walker's been traded standpoint, it hurt the Cowboys, like their national cachet.
I think things like this do happen in sports. I'm not a believer that like the NBA lottery was rigged in the Ewing draft. Like, I don't think that happened.
You didn't think that was the cold envelope? Come on.
I mean, I guess I wouldn't. I wouldn't bet my life on it. But I think things like this do happen. Like, we would be naive to think that owners don't get together and say, listen, we need the Lakers to be good. It's just really good for business when the Lakers
Well,
are
then
good.
what's going on with the Knicks now, Phil?
That's the one that doesn't make sense. Like, the Knicks have been garbage for 20 years, so I don't know. Maybe they've been trying to set James Dolan up, and he's still too incompetent to do it.
Too dumb. Declan,
do you buy it?
Yes, I 100% buy it, because this trade was crazy. You can't tell me that there was not league influence involved in this trade with all these first-round picks and building up Dallas. 100% the league was involved in this. Yeah. I'm all in.
But don't forget, too, that in the Vikings' mind at that time, because the premium put on that position back then was so high, you really did think to yourself, this is now a Super Bowl team. Like, that trade that day, we all thought to ourselves, oh my God, you just got Herschel Walker.
And really, it was
for
the
this
Cowboys
team
that became the Super Bowl
team.
team.
Good for them.
Yeah. All right, and the fourth one, admittedly, this is just from a random dude on the thread named Morning Breath 71, which is a great handle.
Yeah, good for you.
And he says that he is making this up on his own, but I'm going to throw it out there. He said, I've always believed Brett Favre lost to the Saints on purpose in the NFC Championship game. That was his plan, as he has always been a Packer at heart. What better way to hurt the rival Vikings? He probably thought, hey, let's have an amazing season, get so close to the Super Bowl, and then crush their dream.
And you know who Brett Favre grew up a fan of? The New Orleans Saints.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
His dad used to take him to the Superdome once in a while.
Do you buy it? Do you buy that Brett Favre?
Morning Breath 71.
Do you buy that Brett Favre had, whether it was conscious throughout the season or whether it was a moment in his mind as he rolled out to the right? Did Brett Favre roll out to the right and think, I can't. If I complete this pass, we're going to win the Super Bowl. I can't win a Super Bowl with the Minnesota Vikings.
He thought to himself, Tracy Porter's open right now. Tracy Porter, it's wide open. No, but it's...
I buy this one.
But I like it from Morning Breath 71.
Also, if he would have ran 5 yards forward and slid.
Just stumbled.
There were so many things he could have thrown to Berrien.
Buddy Longwell would have kicked the field goal, right?
Throwing the interception made zero sense.
To the middle of the field? Absolutely did.
I buy this more than I buy a bounty gate is the reason you lost that game. That's how I look at it. I
agree with that.
I would buy that Brett Hart.
I agree with that.
Brett Favre sabotaged.
Or Bret Hart.
I'm the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever
Am
will
I the
be.
best? Maybe.
Am I the best there is? Maybe. Am I the best there was?
Yes.
Probably.
I buy more that he sabotaged that game than the other team was trying to hurt you. No, BS, dude. I can't
Well, they were
stand it.
trying to hurt him, but it's not why they lost the game.
Yeah, correct. It's
I agree with
the 5 turnovers and Brett Favre sabotaging the Minnesota Vikings.
Those are your 4
Hang on
conspiracy
the football,
theories.
right?
Man.
So I think the
more
first
think
one
about this,
is dead on right. The Giants one is correct.
I actually buy all 4 of these now. I'm conspiracy theorist. I am tinfoil hat guy. I buy all these now.
Vince McMahon buying the Vikings, though.
Yep.
He would have moved.
Super fun. That's a wrap on this conspiracy theory episode of Purple Daily. We will see you next time.